Are you feeling tired, burnt out, sick of doing what it is you've been doing for the past few years and just generally don't feel like getting out of bed in the morning? The chances are that you're reaching burnout. We put a poll out to all our listeners and to you guys asking you what it is you'd like us to chat about in the podcast and what different ideas and things you wanted to explore. And one of the things that came up was not spreading yourself too thin in your Christian business. Now, I know from personal experience what it's like to go through burnout. And a couple of months ago, I shared basically the whole story of burnout with Lisa Bruton, who runs Arise Sanctuary and Brave by Lisa. So on her YouTube channel, Brave by Lisa, all about my burnout experience, the symptoms and what happened kind of building up to it, actually going through it, and then the road to recover after it. So I'll pop the link to that in the notes and on the YouTube channel. But I feel like a lot of us women, we tend to live life on the edge and we tend to spread ourselves thin a lot. And I don't think God, in retrospect, wants us to do that. Not that I don't think he doesn't want us to work. That's not what I'm saying. But what I do think he wants is for us to do life as a whole in his strength, not in our own. And I feel like he wants us to push faith and to shine the light and to see, miraculous things happening on earth and us being our vessels. But I don't think he wants to give our life in the process. So if you are feeling tired, worn out, really unmotivated, it might be that you've got to the point already where it's really hard to get out of the bed each day. Like you can't face the day. Even just thinking about taking a shower feels too much. That's probably like the extreme end of you're on burnout. There's red flags. You're not looking after yourself anymore, and you need to take a step back and really evaluate. And if you are at that point of feeling depressed about it and like you're feeling like you want to take your own life, you need to go and get to the doctor. If you're not feeling like you're at that point, but you are feeling quite empty, then the chances are you are spreading yourself too thin. And I don't want to get too much into my story, but basically for maybe a good 2.5 years, we had been house sitting. So we didn't have we had stable roof over our head because God provided, but we were always moving to different locations across Sydney. I was managing Christian Women in Business, Automation Girl, and I was working 4 days in a job. And I was managing renovations interstate as well. So we were doing like renovations of a house in like 4 days, sleeping on 2 hours a night. It was a really hectic season in my life personally. And there were lots and lots of stresses involved. I feel like I now understand the meaning of our survival is shelter and food and warmth. Like, we had food, obviously, we were never without food, but to be standing in faith every week for your shelter is a big stress. So having lots of big stresses in our lives, we'd uprooted from where we were in a new city, we didn't really know many people. There was just lots of factors of stress in there, and trying to build a business in the back of it as well just wasn't hopeful. So, give that full on and commuting as well, all different times, lengths of times. Like I got to a point of being I spread myself thin for way too long, unnecessarily, and got to a stage of very much burnt out, to the point where I couldn't get out of bed. Like, that's where I was at. My weekly challenge first was to just go and put the bins out. Like, that's how I had to start my life from burnout. And it's been maybe 3 years since then, and it's still a journey every day of healing. It's still a journey every day of me noticing red flags, me being super, super protective over my boundaries, over my energy, and over what I say yes and no to, with God's guidance, of course. But I think how we stop ourselves, and looking back now and looking at the different things of what I could have said yes to and what I could have said no to. But I think the biggest thing and the biggest lesson I learned most of anything was just about the amount of pressure I put on myself. I put way too much pressure on myself. I was trying to be too many things to too many people. I put pressure on myself to achieve way too much in my business that was out of what God had asked me to do. But it was self-pressure, and I thought I'd be letting God down if I didn't put that pressure on, even though he didn't actually put that pressure on, if that makes any sense whatsoever. The revelation really was, and looking back now, what pressures am I putting on myself that are unnecessary and that I don't need to? If you're feeling empty and that you're stretching yourself too far, I encourage you to just take a moment. You don't necessarily have to write it down. Sometimes we just need people to say things, and it triggers self-reflection for us anyway. But if you want to, sit down and really think, what pressure am I putting on myself to do that I don't need to? What are these pressures? What has God asked me to do? And keep it as super simple. Sometimes we overcomplicate things, and I mean really simplify it back, and really analyze, what am I putting pressure on myself for, and what am I trying to do that's God's job and not my job? I was talking with a friend the other day, and we were talking about events and how, the world's in a really interesting place at the minute. And she reminded me that it's not my job. And we were talking about COVID as well. We're running events through COVID because we'd both been through it. It was very stressful. Well, it was for me. She had a different approach. And as soon as she said it, I was like, oh my gosh, SJ, there you are, doing it again. And it's learning, what are we to do in our strength, and what God's asked us to do, and then what are we doing or trying to do that's God's job. And one of God's jobs is to bring people to us that need our services and our help. So if it's, for example, the annual conference that we've got coming up in September, I put so much pressure on myself that it was my responsibility to get everyone there and to fill all the seats, and to make it this big thing, and just all these things I was making up inside my head that just was so much self-pressure that actually I was taken away from even giving God a little bit of space in that. So this year, completely different strategy of, it's God's response. I'm providing it. I'm the vessel on the earth that's organizing, yes, but it's up to God for him to bring who he needs to for that event, for that moment in time there. That's his job. My job's just to sign the contract, to physically pay the bills for it, and then to rock up, to provide a place for God to meet the women there and then. It's not my job to get to force people to meet God. It's my job to create that space, and that's why we're using the word space a lot on our website, because we are creating the space for God to meet you, or to meet the women that are there. So what pressure are you putting on yourself that's unnecessary, that's not needed, and where in your life are you trying to do things that's God's job? Two really simple questions. And the more that you reflect, the more easy it is to identify and pull yourself up on it, and to give yourself permission to let go and know that you don't have to do that stuff and it's not up to you. That's God's job. Or to let it go, or why am I putting pressure on myself for that particular thing when I really don't need to? I can let it go. Is my life going to end, or is your life going to end if you don't do this particular thing that might be stressing you out? It's a great question to ask. If it's not giving you purpose, if it's not helping you move forwards, and if it's putting false pressure, it's time to let it go. So I really encourage you to do some self-reflection. We've got an amazing retreat coming up in Gerringong at the end of February 2023 that is going to be all about the pruning of the branches, preparing for the year ahead, but doing it purposefully, not just doing what we think we should be doing, but being really intentional and really purposeful with the year ahead, and inviting God into that whole aspect of that planning, of that weekend, so you can just be with Him without any distraction, and just look at the year ahead and really just soak in what it is that God's asking you to do. And it is probably the most simple of things. Like, that's what I've learned also, is the simplicity of it. And you can relax into that simplicity of it and know that God's is having that faith again. And we've spoken about faith through the past episodes, just having that faith that God's going to be there and He's going to show up and He's going to provide the resource, the delegates. He's going to bring the people who need whatever it is that you've got, and just easing into that and having that supernatural peace about that, I think has got to be the furthest away from spreading yourself too thin. So I'll leave you with that today. I'll leave you with those two questions. It's up to you to go, and it's your responsibility, if you're spreading yourself too thin, to stop doing that. And that's the biggest thing I learned with going through burnout. It's my responsibility with what I say yes and no to, and listening to my body and the stress it's going under, because everyone has different capacities, and analysing that and making sure that, you know, I'm going along like this and not like this, and that's yours as well. So I hope you have time to reflect. I hope that God puts on your heart, and I pray that God puts on your heart what things are that's time to let go of, and encourage you to embrace in a peaceful way what He's asking you to keep hold of. I'm SJ, and we'll catch you next time.